What doors have you left open? More years ago than I like to think about, when I was a young fellow, I had this habit of running out the door and leaving it wide open. And my mom, especially in wintertime, she'd be all over me. She says, shut the door. You know, you think you live in a barn? You know, and I don't know, you know how kids are. I was so anxious to do whatever it was that I was doing that I'd just fly out the door. And she used to tell me, you know, shut it. You're letting the cold air in. You know, and if you think about it, we insulate, we caulk windows and keep the doors and windows shut because we don't want the outside influences of the cold air getting inside. And so we make sure we shut the doors. In 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 5 that we heard in our scripture reading, it said, you also as living stones are being built up a spiritual house, a holy priesthood, to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. Peter talks about our spiritual house. And you know, it needs protected just as much as our physical house because there are negative influences trying to get inside. And we always need to make sure that we're closing the doors. I found a quote on the internet about temptation that I think really gets to the heart of the issue. It says, temptation usually comes in through a door that has been deliberately left open. Now think about that for a minute. Temptation usually comes in through a door that you have deliberately left open. Let me illustrate further. Alcohol is not a temptation for me. 40 years ago it was, back before I started going to church, maybe even the first year or so. But I had a friend die, you know, in an automobile accident. Had another friend that took his life because of alcohol. I learned to hate it. And so that door is closed because I hate that sin. I hate it so much that I don't want any parts of it, won't have anything to do with it. Yeah, so that door is effectively closed. Same thing with profane language, cursing. That's just something that never tempts me because even when I hear someone else say it, I sort of, you know, bunch up and cringe. You know, I just don't like it. You know, and so that's something that I have no trouble with. Those doors are not only closed, they're locked. You know, and so I'm protected against negative influences coming in because I hate those sins. But talking about materialism or something like that, well, I'm better than I used to be, but that door still has a crack in it. I don't have that door slammed shut yet. And I sure don't have it locked. You know, and that's the way it is. The things we're tempted by tend to be those things that we've left a crack in the door, right? If you think about it, temptation can only affect us in areas where we don't hate it enough. One of the prayers that I have is that I ask Jesus sometimes in prayers, I says, teach me to hate all these sins the way you hate them. I often pray that because a lot of sins I agree with him. I hate them like he does. There's some though that I don't. Not to the extent that he does. And I need to get better at that. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 6 and verse 24 during the Sermon on the Mount, no one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. Mammon comes from the Greek word mammonis, which means money, wealth, or material possessions. And in our current culture, one of the hardest things for Christians to do is to shut that door of materialism and lock it. You know, because we tend to be in a culture that we're affected by it. Hey, I see the commercials with the brand new trucks. Yeah, I'd like one of those. You know? And I can get swayed too easy at times. And so I need to work on shutting that door a little bit more. Now it's important to note that Jesus did not say that you can't have money, wealth, and material possessions. He never said that. He just said that it can't be your master. And he lived it. You know, I sometimes try to imagine having the power that he did. Or if he wanted something, zap. You know? He did use it. Even when he was hungry. Remember when he was, you know, away in the 40 days of temptation? And the devil came to him, and by that time he was hungry. Like very hungry. And what did the devil say? Command these stones to be made bread. Boy, that would have been a temptation, wouldn't it? But he never used his power just to get, you know, self-satisfaction for himself. He used his power to display that he was the Son of God, but it was doing other things for other people. He didn't use it for himself. In Matthew chapter 8, verses 18 through 20, Jesus made the following statement. The foxes have holes and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Now, Jesus was telling the scribe who boasted that he would follow him wherever he went, he was telling him, hey, there's a cost associated with that. Do you realize that what he was saying, I have no defined place to sleep tonight? Jesus wasn't bragging or boasting. That's not what that was about. He was just trying to let the scribe know, if you say you're going to follow me wherever I go, do you realize this is part of the cost of it? That's what he was trying to do. So, you know, as we look at this, you know, we have to realize that all of us have doors that still are a little bit open, that we haven't completely closed off and locked. Now, some doors that I find easy might be more challenging for someone else. And what they find easy might be hard for me. I'm one of these people, I don't know what it is. And I sometimes have, I was telling Larry, in fact, the other day, I eat too much. You know, probably can't tell, huh? But I eat too much. And I told Larry the other day, I says, in heaven, I know we're going to be a spiritual body and everything. I said, I sure am going to miss my wife's chili, though. You know? And he laughs. He says, I don't know. We'll figure something out. But I say all that to say this. I realize that for some folks, some things are challenging. It's hard to get by them. But we have to work hard on closing the doors that we're leaving open, that negative outside influences can come in and harm us. And so the question I have for each one that's here this morning, and I mean me too, I need to look in the mirror on this one. What doors to your spiritual house have you left open? What areas is it where you can be tempted? You know, it might be things like pride, it might be things like gossip. Fill in the blank. It's whatever things that you're having problems with, that you're struggling with this morning. Because whether you like to think about it or not, part of the reason why you're struggling with it is you've sort of let that door open a little bit. It may be something that you enjoy doing or a temptation that you find hard to walk from. We're all there, right? We have those types of things. I think some of us can identify with what Jane Seabrook said when she said, lead me not into temptation because I can find the way myself. I think I know what she was trying to say. Too often, you know, we could find temptation on our own. We don't even need to have outside influences too often. Some ways to resist temptation. First, realize that temptation itself is not sinful. In James chapter 1, verses 14 through 15, it says, "But each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desires and enticed. Then when desire is conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, brings forth death." Notice that the desire itself is not sinful unless you let it control you and your actions. That's when the desire can become sinful. Why is it important to make that distinction? Because I think sometimes Satan likes to make us feel guilty for even a thought that pops into our mind. Have you ever heard people say things like, "Well, you've thought it, you might as well do it"? Wrong. That's wrong. Because, you know, I don't know, it's just something the way we're wired. I've been studying that lately a lot. And have you ever had thoughts pop into your mind and you say, "Good night, that's not me"? You know, I don't know why I thought that stupid thing. You know, but we all have those kinds of things that pop into our mind. The key is what we do with it. You know, we have to drive it out. We have to get busy or do something else. The Jewish legalists back in the day had the mindset that you could think about committing an act all you wanted as long as you did not actually do it. And that's why Jesus had to talk to them and get the wrong idea out of their head in the Sermon on the Mount when he talked about, you know, some of you say it's wrong to commit murder, and it was, but he says, I need you to go further than that. I need you to go to the point where you would be angry enough to even think about doing it. Because in the Jewish way of thinking was, you could actually want to harm your brother, actually want to harm him, but if you didn't find a way to do it, that was okay then. That's what they thought. You know, they just didn't have opportunity maybe. Or maybe someone was quite willing to commit adultery, but just didn't have the opportunity to do so. Jesus went past all that. Jesus went clear to the heart and says, if you even want to do these things and are focused on it, that's wrong. You know, and those are the doors that we got to shut. You know, it's not only should we not do some of these things, we need to shut the door so we don't even want to do them. You know, we need to work hard in doing that. You know, another illustration I have people come talk to me, you know, just because that's what happens, you know. And the person told me, they say, you know, sometimes I don't feel like coming to services. I come, but I don't really feel like it. You know? And I sat down and talked with him for a while. I says, you know what? You're not always going to be on your A game. You're not always going to be in a spiritual high. I said, I would be more concerned if you stayed home. The fact that you come and are talking to me and telling me that sometimes you don't feel like coming, but you come anyway. I said, actually, that makes me feel good. And they looked at me funny for a little bit. I says, because I want you to do what's right because you love God enough to do it even when you don't feel like it. You know, some people get this weird idea that love is always the warm fuzzies, you know, having this feeling of euphoria or, you know, just feeling a little pumped up or something like that. Let me give you an illustration I've used to try to help people understand. A mother works all day. She comes home at night and her child gets sick, and she's up half the night. and she's got to go to work the next day. Is that fun? No, that's not fun. Is it love, though, sitting up with that child? Oh, yeah. That's not the warm fuzzies, but that's really demonstrating love. And that's what I tried to explain to this person. Maybe you don't feel like coming on that given day, but if you toughen up and come and try to participate the best you can in worship, you're actually showing something to God. You're saying, I didn't feel like it today, but because you're God and because I want to do what's right, I'm going to come anyway. You see what I mean? That's it. That's what to do. Sometimes we demonstrate our love for God more when He tells us to go do a 180-degree turn. If I'm going the same direction that God's going, yeah, that's good. That's not a bad thing. But when He tells me, Ben, you need to turn around and go 180 degrees the other way, and I do it, even though maybe I'm not real thrilled about it, but if I bend my will to His, I'm demonstrating love. You see what I mean? And sometimes I think we can get fouled up in some of our concepts of those. So Satan tries to get us to think that just because we're not always on our A game, that there must be something wrong. No, you do what's right. You come to services, you study your Bibles daily, you pray, even though you're not always on your A game. Do it anyway. Because that's what, demonstrating the love of God is all about. Another thing to do to resist temptation is to get rid of what I call triggers or enablers. Those are things that encourage us to sin. Now, a person that's an alcoholic can't have a six-pack in their refrigerator. We need to recognize the things that cause us to fall into sinful behaviors. One of the things, I'll tell you what, I'm not bothered by that now, but when I was a teenage guy, I'm glad I didn't have the phones that could get right to the internet. I couldn't have handled it back then. I'll just tell you flat out right now, I couldn't have done it. And my heart goes out to these young guys. It really does. To have that kind of sin so easily accessible, my heart goes out to them. That's tough stuff. But it might be they need to get a little flip phone that don't have the internet. And that's maybe what they got to do. Because that's an enabler. That can enable some people to sin. And that might be a trigger that gets them to go to places they need not be. So anything in our lives, any situations we find ourselves in, we need to say, if it's going to cause us to fall into sin, we need to get it out of our presence. Sometimes it amazes me, people say they want to fight the devil or want to fight sin, and then they don't make it very hard for them. We need to make it as hard for the devil to get to us as possible. And yet some people will say things like, I don't want to sin, and then you see them go to a bar. They're marching right into the lion's den. They're going into Satan's lair and say, oh, well, I'll just drink a Pepsi or something like that. You see the fallacy of that? If we take ourselves to Satan, he doesn't even have to come find us. We're going to him. And that's what we do when we leave the doors way open. We're saying, attack. We have to learn to shut the doors that cause us to have weaknesses, negative influences. What time do I need to stop? So
11:15.
11:15? Okay. I should be able to do that. And another thing we have to be careful about is sometimes the people that we hang out with, do you know that friends could get you to do things that your enemies never could? Yeah. There was a young person I knew that it was people in the church that ended up causing them to leave because they got them into things. That young person was strong. That young person was doing well, but then got in with some other, what they believed to be Christians. They got them into some things, and then eventually it caused them to leave the church because they started seeing everything as hypocritical. And it was because her friends got her to do things that her enemies could never do. Yeah, we got to be careful about things like that as well. 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse 33 says, evil communications corrupt good morals. If we're around the wrong types of influences, guess what's going to happen? It's going to rub off. A trigger or an enabler for me, especially now that I'm retired, is too much idle time. I need to find stuff to do, or if I spend too much time just letting this thing crank away with nothing to do, that's not good. You know, what was that old saying that they used to say? Idle hands, the devil's workshop, or something like that. I think it's true. And so what I've taken to doing, after 30 or 40 years, whatever it was, of going to work, getting up at 6 every morning, you can ask my wife, Jewel. I can't shut it down. I'm up at 6 every morning. She says, why don't you sleep in? You're retired now. I said, I can't. I need something to do. I don't know what it is, but I just have to feel like I got to get out and get after something. And so I've taken to flipping houses now. You know, just more. Yeah, I like to make money. I don't lie about that. Remember I said that's one of the doors that's still cracked? Well, but anyway, I like to do that, but I need something to do. Because if I'm too idle, that's a bad thing. And I also like to spend time going up and visiting with Larry and stuff. Because if I don't, you know, you have to fill your mind with good things. Because when we become Christians, we're getting the bad things out, right? Well, there's empty space there. And if you don't fill it up with good things, like the fruits of the Spirit, you know, if you don't fill your heart and mind up with that, the bad things will come back in because you need to have things to do to fill up your time. You know, another very tricky way that Satan gets at us is to get us to not be honest about our spiritual condition. You know, a trap that we could fall into is rationalizing. You know, we could say, yeah, I have that problem, but you know, brother so-and-so has it worse. Is that better? No. But we could do that. We could say, yeah, I have that problem, but you know why I have it? It's the way I'm treated. You know, we could become a victim. You know, there was a quote I found, and I really liked it. James Dobson has said, resist the temptation to see yourself as the victim. Because our society, that's what we preach these days, isn't it? Everybody is a victim. You know? Oh, I've been mistreated this way, or the group of people I belong to are mistreated, or whatever it is. We've taken it to another level of everyone looking as though they've been victimized. But Satan can use that to get us to rationalize, can he? He can make us feel justified, say, well, yeah, maybe I have this problem, but yeah, my parents should have maybe taught me better. Well, does that fix anything? No. Yeah, so another thing that Satan uses is making you feel like somehow you have a reason for the sin that you're committing. It's okay because of these factors, or because I was mistreated, or because the people at work did this to me, or whatever it is. He could cause us to start thinking that somehow it's okay to have these feelings. And finally, we have to learn to hate the sins that God hates. James chapter 4 and verse 7 says, resist the devil and he will flee from you. I have an analogy. Not only do I like to hunt, I like to fish. And I often come up this way. One of my very favorite places is right up here at Clear Creek, out from Sigel. Some of you guys might know that place. And Callan Run. I love to fish for trout. And over the years, I've sort of caught on to it. There's different kinds of fish in the stream. There's the ones I call the dumb ones. That they could see me. They could see my shadow. They could see everything. It doesn't matter. Throw any kind of bait in front of them, what they do, just run and grab it. Those are the dumb ones. And then there's the ones that are tougher. They're the ones that are spooked, that just shoot under the bank, and they're really hard to get because they're afraid. And as soon as they see that bait, they say, I'm not going to go for that. And they run and hide under a bank. But there's a third group of fish, and I think a lot of us can identify with this kind. That's the fish that comes out. You guys ever have a fish come out, look at the bait, not really take it, and then drift back? You cast again, the same thing? Because they're interested in it. They're looking at it. They're toying with the idea of sin, but realize, boy, that's dangerous if I bite into that. They know it. Well, see, I mark those down. I let them go. I'm coming back to visit them. And I'm going to change up the bait just a little bit. And I'll often get them. Because I know that they're toying with the idea. Satan's a fisherman too. And if you don't lock that door solid shut, you leave a crack there and you toy with the idea of sin, he'll be back to visit you again. And he'll be back having a different twist on it. Just mark it down. If you show any weakness in your spiritual house, any doors that you're leaving open, Satan's taking note of it. He'll be back. The way for all of us is just determined that we're going to shut the doors. We're not going to allow him access. And finally, we need to rejoice in God's grace, realizing that yes, we're going to mess up at times. Under the best scenarios, we can do everything we can do to lock up our spiritual house, and there's going to be times that we're going to fall. But if we're walking in the light, if we're really trying, there's grace for those times. And we can use that to help bolster us too. I'm going to close with a story that really has touched my heart over the years. And I think it expresses grace to me just about as well as any other story I've heard. There was a man named Maximilian Kolbe. He was a Franciscan monk, or a priest, if you will, and he lived in Poland. And he was called the Saint of Auschwitz. He was taken to the concentration camp that the Nazis had at Auschwitz, and he was known for sharing his food with the sick And he would find those people that were almost too sick to work, and he would help them and try to nurse them back to health. Because if you were found not working, that was like a death sentence in the concentration camp. As soon as you became too weak, that meant off you would go to the gas chambers. And each one had a number. His particular number was 16670. Now, Maximilian Kolbe, he was in his 40s at that time. And there was another young man that he had came to know. His name was František Gabanacek. He was a young inmate at the time. And he was he was brought to Auschwitz to basically to work him to death. And Karl Fritsch was the deputy commander at that time at Auschwitz. And there was a prison escape at the end of July or the beginning of August in 1942. And the way the Nazis worked it, to try to keep people from escaping, what they would do is for every sick man that would successfully escape, that would mean the death sentence for 10 others. They would take 10 other people out and shoot them. Well, in early August of that year, there was an escape from Auschwitz. Someone had managed to get away, and so they called a bunch of the inmates into the courtyard and started calling out these numbers. Each one of them had a number. And they called out 10 numbers, and František Gabanacek was number 10. He came forward. They were supposed to come out of the crowd and come forward. But then he fell down to the ground, he collapsed, he started crying, saying, "My wife and my children. How are they going to live? My wife and my children." It was at that time that Maximilian Kolbe came striding forward. It's a wonder he wasn't shot on sight. But he came walking forward and he said, "Request permission to speak, sir." And the commander was sort of taken aback by it all. And he didn't know what to do. He said, "Permission granted." And then Maximilian Kolbe says, "I wish to die in place of this man." And he pointed to František Gabanacek. He said, "He's young, he's a better worker than I am. Look at me, I'm old, I'm not that good." He said, "Take me instead." He knew the Nazi mentality. And the commandant said, "Request granted." And František Gabanacek, he was there, he said inmates weren't allowed to speak in those gatherings. He said, I could only thank him with my eyes. I looked up at him and looked at him. And he said, I couldn't believe what was happening. Here was another man giving up his life so that I could live. František Gabanacek survived World War II and survived the death camp. But every year, on August 18th, every year, until his health started failing recently, he made an annual pilgrimage to Auschwitz to visit the grave site, as near as he could, in mass graves, of Maximilian Kolbe, the man who had died, so he could live. Isn't that really the story of you and me in Christ? If you think about it. We should have been struggling up that hill under the weight of the cross. It's what we should have been doing. But he came forward. When our number was called, Jesus came forward and says, "I'll do it." And he did. That's grace, folks. And that should cause us to be so thankful. That should cause us to be so committed to him that we'll close those doors that we've left open and we'll live for him. Anyone needs to respond? There's an invitation song. Please come forward as you stand and sing to encourage you.